Good evening, my dear friend, and welcome to your sleep story. I'm Mountain Lullabies, and it's my privilege to guide you through tonight's journey as you drift off into peaceful slumber. I know that many of you look forward to these moments of stillness, a time to rest, rejuvenate, and find serenity. So, tonight, I will be your companion, here to help you relax and unwind as we embrace the calm of the night. Before we begin, I encourage you to make yourself comfortable. Find your perfect position, whether you're lying on your bed or nestled on your favorite chair, ready to let go of the day. Take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, feel the weight of the world begin to lift off your shoulders. Tonight's story is designed to help you not just fall asleep, but to gently ease your mind into the deep relaxation it craves. So, let's start by releasing all the tension in your body, allowing your muscles to soften and your thoughts to settle. I'm going to count down from 10 to 1, and as I do, I want you to focus on your breath and let each number take you deeper into relaxation. 10. Feel the support of the surface beneath you. Whether it's the softness of your bed or the solid earth beneath your feet, let yourself feel grounded. Notice the security of this support, and let it help you feel safe and calm. Number 9. Now, bring your awareness to your body. How do you feel? Is there any tension you're holding on to? Gently scan from head to toe. If you find any tightness in your body, breathe deeply into that area and release it with your exhale. 8. With each breath, imagine that you're becoming lighter. Picture your breath like a soft breeze, carrying away any stress or worries. Let go of everything that no longer serves you. You are completely safe here. This is your time to rest and recharge. Let my voice be the anchor of safety for you tonight. Know that you are in a space of peace, free from any distractions or concerns. Chapter 6. Allow your body to sink deeper into relaxation. With each breath, imagine the weight of your body gently melting into the surface beneath you, becoming soft and completely at ease. Let gratitude fill your heart for this moment. You are fortunate to be able to rest now, to let your body heal and your mind take a peaceful break. Feel thankful for this time to unwind. 4. Now, begin to let go of the events of the day. Whatever happened today is in the past. Picture the thoughts as clouds floating by in the sky. Acknowledge them and allow them to drift away. 3. With each breath, become more aware of the peaceful energy surrounding you. Imagine yourself surrounded by a soft, comforting light, enveloping you in warmth and calm. You're now completely at ease. 2. Your body is fully relaxed now, your mind calm and quiet. Take a final deep breath, and with this exhale, feel yourself drifting gently towards rest. You're ready for sleep now. Let go completely and allow the peaceful stillness to surround you. Now that your body is relaxed and your mind is calm, we're ready to begin the story. Let the words guide you into deeper relaxation as you journey into a peaceful, dream-filled sleep. As I tell you tonight's sleep story, feel free to let your imagination wander, knowing that you are in a safe and comforting space. Just let go and enjoy this moment, my friend. You've done wonderfully in allowing yourself to relax, and now it's time to surrender to the soothing sounds of sleep. Rest well, and may you have the most peaceful, restful night's sleep. There was a time, not too long ago, when the world around Oliver Callahan was full of color, noise, and vibrancy. The city he called home had once been his playground, a place where he'd worked tirelessly, played joyfully, and loved deeply. As a young man, Oliver had been a passionate architect, designing buildings that reached for the sky with ambition and beauty. His hands had created something extraordinary, and his heart had been full, fueled by the drive of success, love, and community. But time, as it often does, has a way of eroding even the brightest of dreams. Years passed, seasons changed, and so did Oliver. The buildings he once designed were now just memories etched in the skyline. His youthful energy had given way to the slow and steady erosion of age, the aches and pains of a body that no longer moved as swiftly or as boldly as it once had. His vibrant mind, once sharp and clear, had grown cloudy with the weight of years that felt like a burden more than a gift. Oliver now lived in the grand apartment he'd once shared with the love of his life. That was before time had taken them both in different directions. His wife, Charlotte, had passed away a few years ago, and with her, a piece of Oliver's soul had quietly slipped away. Since then, his apartment had felt more like a mausoleum than a home, a place filled with the ghostly whispers of laughter and love, the walls echoing with the absence of a life once so full of joy. The apartment, large and airy with its high ceilings and vintage decor, once served as a sanctuary of creativity and happiness. Now, it felt hollow, its grand windows overlooking the bustling city below, offering little more than a silent reminder of what had been. The quiet hum of the city outside, once a backdrop to his daily life, now felt more like a distant noise that had nothing to do with him anymore. The cafes he used to visit, the streets he'd wander, the people he'd greet, they all seemed to be part of another life, a life he no longer belonged to. Every day, Oliver followed a routine that was both comforting and suffocating. He would wake up early, eat a simple breakfast alone, and then spend his hours reading books he'd already read a dozen times, staring out of his windows, or sometimes simply sitting in the dark, letting time slip away from him. The world continued to spin. People continued to live, but Oliver was no longer part of it. He had resigned himself to the belief that his best days were behind him, that he was now a mere spectator in the grand play of life. The paintings on his walls, once symbols of the vibrant years he'd spent creating, now felt like relics of a forgotten past. Each brush stroke, each piece of art had once held a story, a purpose, but now those stories were lost to him, fading like old photographs left in a dusty album. He'd become accustomed to the quiet, even found solace in it, but deep down, Oliver felt an emptiness he had long ignored, a growing hollowness inside him, aching and unseen. One evening, as winter's chill settled over the city, Oliver bundled himself in his coat and stepped out for his daily visit to the corner store. The wind whipped around him, biting at his face, but he barely noticed. His thoughts were elsewhere, lost in the monotonous rhythms of his life. As he walked through the streets, avoiding eye contact with those who passed him by, he couldn't help but feel the weight of his solitude bearing down on him. The gas lamps flickered above, casting a soft, warm glow on the cobbled streets. The city, though quiet, was alive with the hum of life that had always been so familiar to him. As he walked, lost in his thoughts, something caught his eye. a small, white form sitting just by the curb, staring back at him. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, or perhaps a shadow cast by the street lamp. But as he drew closer, the little creature became clearer. A small dog, its coat as white as the first snow of winter, sat by the sidewalk, watching him with a curious gaze. Its eyes seemed to shine with innocence and warmth, a stark contrast to the cold, gray world Oliver had grown so used to. The dog's presence was unexpected, almost surreal in the stillness of the night. Oliver paused for a moment, taken aback by the quiet companionship that seemed to emanate from the little animal. He hadn't realized how much he had missed an encounter like this, a simple, unspoken connection between two living beings. The dog's tail wagged slightly, a gentle acknowledgement of Oliver's presence. And in that small gesture, something stirred deep within him. For the first time in years, Oliver felt a flicker of something warm and familiar inside. He knelt down slowly, extending a hand toward the dog, unsure of what to expect. The dog, after a moment of hesitation, nuzzled into his hand, its warmth spreading through his fingers like a gentle current. Oliver felt his heart tighten with emotion, and for the first time in a long while, the emptiness he had carried inside seemed to soften, just a little. The dog, with its soft fur and quiet presence, had bridged the gap between the past and the present, between loneliness and connection. For a fleeting moment, Oliver allowed himself to feel something more than the weight of his years. He looked around, half expecting the dog's owner to appear, but the street was empty. It seemed as though this little creature had been waiting for him, waiting to remind him of a connection that he had forgotten he needed. The days that followed that unexpected encounter with the little white dog brought an unfamiliar sense of anticipation to Oliver's routine. He found himself looking forward to his solitary trips to the corner store, no longer feeling the weight of loneliness pressing so heavily upon his chest. Instead, a flicker of hope, however small, began to form. Each day, as he made his way through the bustling streets, his heart would lift slightly when he thought of the dog. He wasn't sure why, but the memory of the dog's gentle gaze stayed with him, filling the quiet spaces of his mind in ways he couldn't explain. Each evening, like clockwork, Oliver would make his way to the store, only to find the little white dog sitting there, waiting for him. The dog's tail would wag softly as it spotted him, as though it, too, had come to expect their brief meetings. Oliver began to notice how, without fail, the dog was always there, like a constant, steady presence in the otherwise fleeting and unpredictable world around him. On the fourth day after their first meeting, Oliver brought a small treat with him, a biscuit he had picked up at the market, a simple thing, but it felt significant. As he approached the dog, he crouched down slowly, offering the treat. The dog sniffed it for a moment, then took it gently from his hand, its eyes watching him with such intensity that Oliver couldn't help but smile. The dog's warmth, its trust, and its unspoken bond with him felt so profound, it stirred something deep within him. "Here you go," Oliver murmured softly, his voice quieter than he realized. The words felt odd on his lips. He hadn't spoken to anyone like this in ages, not since Charlotte had been by his side. He had forgotten how comforting it was to simply share a moment with another being. For the next few days, Oliver made it a point to bring treats for the little dog. Each time he saw the animal sitting there by the curb, he felt a tug at his heart. It was as if the dog was waiting for him, and for the first time in a long while, Oliver wanted to be there. He wanted to show the dog that he was not alone either. The dog became a constant in his life, a simple yet profound companion in a world that had become far too quiet. Oliver couldn't help but wonder about the little creature. How had it ended up on the streets? Where was its owner? And most of all, why had it chosen to wait for him every evening? One particularly cold afternoon, as the wind howled down the streets and the sky threatened to snow, Oliver spotted the little dog sitting by the corner store again. But this time, something was different. The dog didn't approach him with its usual eager tail wagging. It sat still, its posture a little more hunched, its eyes sadder than usual. Oliver's heart clenched as he walked closer, noticing how the dog was shivering in the cold. Without a second thought, he knelt down to the dog's level, reaching out a hand to gently stroke its fur. "You're cold, aren't you?" Oliver said softly, the words more for himself than for the dog. The dog looked up at him with its large brown eyes, its body trembling beneath the weight of the chill. Oliver's heart ached as he looked at the little creature. For a moment, he felt a surge of empathy, something he hadn't felt for anyone or anything in years. He had always been a man of action, a man who knew what he wanted and how to achieve it. But now, in this quiet moment, all he could feel was a deep desire to do something, to help. He glanced around, and to his surprise, there was no one else in sight. The streets were empty, the world slowing down as the winter evening settled in. Without thinking twice, Oliver made up his mind. The dog needed him, and for the first time in ages, Oliver felt like he needed someone too. "Come on, little one," Oliver said, his voice more firm now, though his heart raced with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The dog seemed to understand, its eyes lighting up with recognition. Oliver extended his hand once more, this time offering it as an invitation. To his relief, the dog moved forward, its steps slow but determined. Oliver smiled as he reached down, gently lifting the dog into his arms. It felt small and fragile in his grasp, and as he held it close, the warmth of the animal's body against his own seemed to melt some of the cold that had settled deep inside him. He walked back to his apartment, the dog tucked under his arm, its head resting against his chest. As they made their way up the stairs to his apartment, Oliver couldn't help but feel a surge of warmth in his heart. The loneliness that had plagued him for so long seemed to diminish, replaced by something much more comforting, a sense of connection, of companionship. When he opened the door to his apartment, it didn't feel quite as empty as it had before. The walls, once so silent and cold, seemed to embrace the presence of the little dog in a way that made the whole place feel more alive. The dog, in turn, seemed to settle in immediately. It sniffed the air, explored the corners of the apartment, and eventually found a cozy spot by the fire, curling up into a little ball. Oliver smiled as he watched the dog, feeling a warmth in his chest that he hadn't realized he had been missing. For the first time in a long while, the apartment felt like a home again. It wasn't just the fire crackling or the soft glow of the lamp that made the space feel so inviting. It was the little dog, with its innocent eyes and gentle presence that had breathed new life into this place that had once felt so devoid of joy. As he sat in his favorite armchair, watching the dog settle in by the fire, Oliver realized something important. In saving the little dog, he had saved himself. And for the first time in years, he felt something he thought he'd never feel again: hope. As the days passed, Oliver found himself slowly slipping into a new routine, one that included the little dog, now affectionately named Claude, at his side. Every morning, Claude would greet him with eager eyes and a wagging tail, ready to accompany him through the day. Oliver had never thought much about the simple pleasures of life until now, but with Claude's presence, even the most mundane tasks began to feel full of possibility. One of the first things Oliver noticed was how the mornings felt different. He had always woken up early, but now it wasn't the coldness of solitude that greeted him when he opened his eyes. It was Claude's gentle presence, lying peacefully at the foot of his bed. The sight of the dog, curled up so contentedly, brought a sense of calm and comfort that filled the space between Oliver and the world outside. He would run his fingers through Claude's soft fur, the dog nuzzling against him in gratitude. It was as though the bond between them had already deepened in such a short time. As the days turned to weeks, Oliver's world began to change in small, subtle ways. He started to go out more often, no longer burdened by the weight of isolation. His apartment, once filled with silence and memories of lost moments, now felt alive. The mornings were brighter, and even the evenings seemed warmer. The simple act of walking Claude through the city, his liage held loosely in Oliver's hand, became an anchor to reality, grounding him in the present moment. The city itself, once a place he had distanced himself from, now felt vibrant. People stopped to greet him and Claude, some offering a friendly scratch behind the dog's ears, others striking up small conversations. Oliver found himself engaging with the world in a way he hadn't in years. He would smile back at the passers-by, sharing a brief connection with strangers that, at first, felt foreign. But as time went on, Oliver realized how much he had missed those simple human interactions. The shared smiles, the fleeting conversations, the small gestures that added depth to the everyday. One afternoon, while walking through the park, Oliver felt a stirring of something unfamiliar, a sense of contentment. Claude had stopped to sniff at the ground, his tail wagging in a carefree rhythm, while Oliver stood still, watching him. The sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the path, and the birds sang their sweet songs. It was the kind of moment Oliver had once taken for granted, but now, with Claude by his side, it felt as though he were seeing the world for the first time. For the first time in years, Oliver began to appreciate the beauty of the city around him. He looked up at the buildings, noticing the intricate details on their facades, details he had walked past countless times without ever truly seeing. He noticed the laughter of children playing nearby, the way the flowers in the park swayed gently in the breeze. Life, which had once seemed so overwhelming and distant, now felt full of promise, even in the quietest moments. One evening, after a particularly pleasant day out in the city, Oliver returned home to find Claude waiting by the door, his tail wagging excitedly. It was as though the little dog had been anticipating his return, just as much as Oliver had been anticipating his own. The bond between them was growing stronger with each passing day, and Oliver felt a sense of gratitude in his heart that he couldn't quite explain. That night, after a simple meal and a quiet evening spent reading in his favorite armchair, Oliver found himself contemplating the changes that had taken place since the day he had first met Claude. His life, once full of emptiness, now felt full of possibility. He no longer dreaded the quiet hours of the evening when the darkness seemed to magnify the weight of his isolation. Instead, The evenings had become a time of comfort, a time to unwind with Claude by his side, the soft sound of the dogs breathing a calming rhythm that filled the room. It wasn't just that Claude had filled the emptiness in Oliver's life, it was more than that. The dog had given him something he had lost a long time ago: hope. Oliver realized that in the simple act of taking the dog in, he had found a new purpose, a new reason to engage with the world. Each day, Claude gave him something to look forward to, something to cherish. It wasn't just about the dog's presence, it was about what that presence represented: connection, companionship, and the possibility of new beginnings. As Oliver lay in bed that night, his heart felt lighter than it had in years. He glanced over at Claude, curled up in his little bed by the window, and smiled. The quiet comfort of the dog's companionship filled the room. And Part 6. The bond strengthens. As the seasons slowly turned, the bond between Oliver and Claude grew deeper and more profound. What had started as a chance encounter, a fleeting moment of connection, had blossomed into something far more significant. Each day, Oliver discovered new layers to their companionship. Each moment further cementing the unspoken understanding they shared. It was spring when the world around them began to bloom. The once muted streets of the city were now alive with the colors of flowers in full bloom, and the warm sun bathed everything in golden light. With the arrival of spring, Oliver found himself more and more in tune with the rhythms of life. He had always loved art, but lately he found himself seeking out the beauty that surrounded him. He would walk through the park with Claude by his side, pausing to take in the details, the way the sunlight dappled through the trees, how the petals of flowers seemed to sway in time with the wind. The simple act of appreciating these moments felt like a return to himself, a rediscovery of the man he once was. Claude had become more than just a companion. He had become Oliver's lens through which to view the world. The dog's unbridled joy at the smallest things reminded Oliver to savor the beauty in the everyday. Whether it was the excitement Claude displayed when chasing after a fallen leaf, or the way the dog would sit with rapt attention at the sight of a squirrel, Oliver began to recognize how much he had missed in his own life. The ability to feel that pure, unfiltered joy in the moment. One morning, as they wandered through a sun-dappled street, Claude tugged at his leash excitedly, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. Oliver couldn't help but smile. It had become a familiar sight. Claude leading the way, his tail wagging in eager anticipation of whatever adventure the day would bring. The dog had transformed from a quiet companion into a beacon of energy, a constant reminder that life was full of surprises if you were willing to embrace them. "Where to today, Claude?" Oliver chuckled as he followed the dog's lead down an unfamiliar path. It was a path he hadn't taken before, and he realized that, just like Claude, he was stepping into new territory, ready to explore the world again. Claude, ever faithful, turned back to look at Oliver with those soulful eyes, waiting for him to catch up. It was as if the dog understood that their journey together was one of mutual discovery. As they walked, Oliver couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since the day he had first met Claude. The man who had once been withdrawn and resigned had now become someone full of hope, full of life. Claude had given him more than just companionship. The dog had given him the courage to re-engage with the world and rediscover the joys of living. Their first stop that day was the local bakery, a small, cozy shop that Oliver had visited for years but hadn't stepped foot in since his retirement. He had always loved the smell of fresh bread and pastries, but the idea of being around people had once felt too overwhelming. Now, with Claude at his side, he felt a sense of ease as he entered the shop. The baker, a friendly man with a broad smile, greeted them warmly. "Ah, Mr. Ambrose, I see you've brought your little friend today," the baker said, his voice filled with warmth. "What can I get for you?" Oliver smiled, feeling a sense of comfort in the familiarity of the moment. "Just the usual," he replied, "and perhaps a treat for Claude here. He's been quite the good boy." Claude's tail wagged enthusiastically, and the baker chuckled as he bent down to offer the dog a small bone-shaped biscuit. "For the good dog," he said, handing it over with a wink. As Oliver left the bakery with his bag of pastries and Claude happily munching on his treat, he realized just how much his life had changed. He had never thought he would enjoy the simple act of running errands again. But with Claude by his side, everything felt new. The dog had brought back a sense of wonder and excitement for the little moments that used to be so ordinary. Their next stop was the park, where the sight of children playing and the sound of laughter in the air made Oliver pause. For the first time in a long while, he felt a connection to the world around him. Watching Claude interact with the children, chasing after a ball or sitting calmly by their side, Oliver was reminded of the beauty of human connection. Claude's easy camaraderie with others was a reflection of the joy Oliver had rediscovered in his own life. As they sat on a bench, Claude's head resting on Oliver's lap, the old man couldn't help but smile. The weight that had once pressed heavily on his chest, the weight of isolation and loneliness, had lifted. It was as though Claude had not only brought light into Oliver's life, but had also awakened a part of him that he had long since forgotten. "I never thought I'd find peace like this again," Oliver whispered, looking down at the dog. "You've shown me that I still have so much to experience, Claude. Thank you for that." Claude's ears perked up at the sound of Oliver's voice, and the dog gave a soft, contented whine, as if understanding the depth of the words. Later that evening, as they returned home, Oliver found himself reflecting on the changes that had occurred over the past months. It wasn't just the dog that had transformed his life, it was the way that Claude had opened Oliver's heart again. He had allowed the man to reconnect with the world, to appreciate the beauty around him, and to rediscover the simple joys that life had to offer. Every day felt like a new adventure, and each moment spent with Claude was a reminder that life was still full of possibilities. As the sun set, casting a warm golden glow across the apartment, Oliver and Claude settled in for the night. The dog curled up at the foot of the bed, and Oliver turned off the light, his heart full of peace. For the first time in years, he felt truly at home in his own life. With Claude by his side, Oliver knew that there were still many more journeys to be had, and he was ready to embrace them all. Oliver realized that, though his life had been solitary for so long, he was no longer truly alone. With a gentle sigh, he closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep, his heart at peace. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Oliver felt ready to face it, side by side with Claude. In the weeks that followed, Oliver and Claude continued to transform each other's lives in ways neither could have predicted. It wasn't just the joy of companionship that had changed Oliver's daily routine. It was something deeper, something transformative. The presence of the dog had opened a door in his heart, one that had been tightly sealed for years. Now, the world felt different, as if the colors were a little brighter. the sounds a little clearer and the air a little fresher. Life, once a blur of monotonous days, now felt full of new possibilities. Each morning, Oliver's heart stirred as he heard the soft click of Claude's paws against the floor, his tail wagging in excitement for another day of adventure. Oliver had come to look forward to those early moments when the world was still quiet, when he and Claude would share a few minutes together before the bustle of the day began. Claude had become more than just a dog. He was Oliver's friend, his companion, and even his muse. The dog had a way of bringing out the best in him, encouraging him to embrace life again, to step outside the confines of his apartment, and to rediscover the world that had once filled him with such joy. One of the most noticeable changes in Oliver's life was his newfound love for walking. Before Claude, he had dreaded the thought of going outside, the weight of his solitude hanging over him like a heavy cloud. But now, each walk with the dog felt like a small adventure. Claude's eager steps, his joyful barking, and the way he would stop and sniff the world around him, it all reminded Oliver that there was still so much beauty to be found, even in the simplest things. Whether it was walking through the park, admiring the vibrant flowers, or watching the children play, Oliver found himself engaged with the world in a way he hadn't in years. The park had become their favorite spot. It was a quiet, peaceful place, tucked away from the noise of the city, where they could walk together without distractions. As they strolled along the winding paths, Claude would dart ahead, his tail a blur of excitement, before stopping to smell the grass, or to chase after a butterfly that fluttered by. Oliver would smile, watching the dog's carefree joy, and for the first time in a long while, he realized that he too was beginning to feel lighter, freer. The weight of his past seemed to be slipping away, replaced by something new, a sense of purpose, of connection to the world, and to life itself. And then there were the days when Oliver would sit on the park bench, taking in the world around him. With Claude resting contentedly at his feet, Oliver would watch as the world passed by. He noticed the people more, the elderly couple holding hands as they walked, the young mother pushing a stroller, the man jogging by with his dog. He hadn't realized just how isolated he had become until he started to see others again. Their lives, their stories, were all unfolding around him, and he felt more connected to it all than he ever had before. It was as if Claude had reminded him that the world was still full of people, of moments, of beauty, and that it was never too late to start living again. On one particularly chilly afternoon, after a long walk in the park, Oliver and Claude returned home to the warmth of their apartment. As soon as they entered, the familiar, comforting scent of the old apartment enveloped them. Oliver set down his coat and hat and watched as Claude made his way to his favorite spot by the window, curling up into a little ball. The sight of the dog, so content, filled Oliver with a sense of gratitude. His apartment, once a place of emptiness, now felt like a home, alive with the presence of another living being. Later that evening, as the fire crackled softly in the fireplace, Oliver sat in his favorite armchair, a book resting in his hands. Claude lay at his feet, his soft breathing the only sound in the room. The two of them had fallen into a quiet routine. Oliver would read, sometimes for hours, while Claude dozed beside him. The simple act of sharing space with another living being brought a peace that Oliver hadn't known he was missing. He would pause every now and then, glancing down at the dog, who would look back up at him with eyes full of understanding. In those moments, Oliver felt as if he had found something he had long been searching for, a companion who didn't need words to communicate, a friend who understood him completely. But the transformation didn't stop there. As Oliver's connection with Claude grew stronger, so did his desire to reconnect with the world. He began to venture out more, meeting old friends he hadn't seen in years. They would sit at the local cafe, chatting over coffee, reminiscing about the past. At first, it felt strange. He had grown so accustomed to his isolation, but with each conversation, each laugh, he began to feel something that had been missing for so long: joy. The dog had brought him back to life, and now he was opening his heart to the people around him once again. Claude, for his part, seemed to revel in these interactions. He would wag his tail and roll over on his back, inviting people to pet him, and his infectious joy never failed to bring smiles to the faces of those around him. Oliver couldn't help but notice how much more vibrant the world seemed now. The city, once a place that had felt so cold and indifferent, now felt full of warmth and life. Every day, Oliver discovered something new to appreciate. Whether it was the sound of laughter in the streets, the beauty of a sunset, or the simple pleasure of sitting on a park bench with Claude by his side. As time passed, the man who had once resigned himself to a life of solitude began to blossom once again. He took up painting again, something he had not done in years. He found himself inspired by the world around him, the way the light played on the buildings, the way the clouds drifted across the sky. Claude, ever the patient companion, would sit by his side, watching as Oliver picked up his brush and began to paint once more. Claude had become more than just a pet. He had become a catalyst for change in Oliver's life, a constant reminder that it was never too late to begin anew. The companionship, the unconditional love, and the simple joy of living with another being had brought a transformation in Oliver that was nothing short of miraculous. That evening, as the two of them settled in for bed, Oliver reflected on how far he had come. The emptiness that had once defined his life was now filled with purpose and joy. He looked over at Claude, who was already curled up at the foot of the bed, and smiled. For the first time in years, Oliver felt truly at peace. The world, once a place of loss and solitude, had become a place of connection, of possibility, and of love. And as he closed his eyes, he knew that no matter what the future held, he and Claude would face it together, side by side, ready for whatever came next. As the months passed, Oliver's world continued to change in ways he had never imagined. The transformation brought about by his new companion, Claude, was more profound than he could have anticipated. What began as a small spark of connection had blossomed into a full, vibrant flame that ignited his entire life. Every day, Oliver woke up to a world filled with new joys, new possibilities, and a deep sense of reconnection, not just with the world around him, but with himself. One of the most significant changes came in the form of Oliver's renewed sense of curiosity. He had spent so many years withdrawn, cocooned in his solitude, that he had forgotten what it felt like to be curious about the world. But Claude had reignited that spark in him. Each walk with the dog was an adventure, an exploration of life's simple pleasures. Whether they were strolling through the park, discovering new paths, or watching the seasons change, Oliver found himself appreciating the beauty in the small details. The way the sun painted the leaves golden in the fall, or how the scent of flowers filled the air in spring. Oliver also found himself becoming more engaged with the people around him. Before Claude, he had kept to himself, avoiding social situations and interactions. But now, with Claude by his side, he felt more confident, more open to engaging with others. At first, it was small moments, a smile exchanged with a neighbor or a brief conversation with a shopkeeper. But over time, these moments grew into more meaningful connections. It was as if the dog had opened a door that had long been shut, allowing Oliver to step out into the world again, to experience the warmth of human interaction, and to reconnect with the joy of shared moments. One afternoon, as they walked through the local park, Oliver spotted a familiar face in the crowd. It was a former colleague, someone he had worked with years ago but hadn't seen since he had retired. The man was sitting on a bench, enjoying the sunshine, and when he saw Oliver, he waved enthusiastically. Oliver hesitated for a moment, but with Claude's gentle tug on the leash, he walked over. "Oliver, my friend," the man said warmly, standing up to shake his hand. "It's been far too long. I heard you've been living a quiet life lately. How's everything going?" Oliver smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't expected. "It's been good. Very good, actually. And you?" "Oh, same old," the man replied with a chuckle. "But I'm glad to see you out and about. You've got a dog now, I see. What's his name?" "This is Claude," Oliver said, his heart swelling with pride as Claude wagged his tail enthusiastically. "He's been a big part of the change in my life." The man looked down at Claude with a smile. "It's amazing how pets can change everything, isn't it? I can see it in your eyes. You look different, more alive, more present." Oliver couldn't help but nod. "I never realized how much I had been missing until he came into my life." As the conversation continued, Oliver found himself talking more openly than he had in years. The man had been a close friend in his working days, but it had been so long since they'd had a real conversation. It felt good to catch up, to laugh, and to share stories. They talked about old colleagues, shared memories, and even discussed current events. The simple act of talking, of reconnecting with someone who had once been an important part of his life, filled Oliver with a sense of contentment he hadn't felt in so long. After their chat, Oliver and Claude continued their walk through the park, and as they did, Oliver's heart felt lighter. He realized how much he had been holding back from the world. He had been afraid of letting people in, afraid of feeling vulnerable. But now, with Claude by his side, he found that vulnerability wasn't something to fear. It was something to embrace. It was through his connection with Claude that he had learned to open up again, to share his life, his thoughts, and his heart with others. As the days turned into weeks, Oliver's circle of connections grew. He began to attend local art exhibitions again, something he had not done in years. He reconnected with old friends, some of whom he had lost touch with after his retirement. He found himself volunteering at the local community center, helping with art classes for children. It was in these small acts of service that Oliver rediscovered his purpose. He had always been a man who loved to create, who thrived in the company of others, and now, with Claude at his side, he was able to live that truth once again. But the greatest joy came from the quiet moments. In the evenings, after a long day of reconnecting with the world, Oliver and Claude would settle in for a peaceful night. Claude would curl up at the foot of the bed, his soft breathing a comforting presence in the room. Oliver would sit by the fire, reading a book or writing in his journal. The companionship of the dog had brought a calmness to his evenings, a peacefulness that allowed him to reflect on the day and appreciate the small joys that had come with it. One evening, as the two of them sat by the fire, Oliver paused in his reading to look at Claude. The dog's eyes were half closed, a contented look on his face as he lay on the rug. Oliver's heart swelled with gratitude. In that moment, he realized that Claude had not only given him a sense of purpose, but had also brought him a deep sense of peace. The world, which had once felt cold and indifferent, was now full of warmth and love. It was all because of the little dog who had walked into his life and changed everything. "I think we've both found something special, haven't we, Claude?" Oliver whispered softly to the dog, who responded with a soft whimper and a wag of his tail. Claude had brought Oliver a new way of seeing the world, a way that was filled with love, joy, and appreciation for the present moment. Oliver now understood that the beauty of life lay not in the grand, sweeping moments, but in the small, everyday experiences, the quiet walks, the shared smiles, and the gentle companionship of a loyal friend. As the fire crackled in the background and the night grew deeper, Oliver closed his book, his heart full of peace. He looked down at Claude, who was now asleep at his feet, and smiled. For the first time in years, he felt truly at home in his life. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Oliver found himself waking up each morning with a renewed sense of purpose. Life had shifted in ways he had never expected, and it was all due to a small white dog named Claude. The companionship had transformed not only his daily routines, but his very outlook on life. In the presence of Claude, Oliver rediscovered what it meant to feel alive, to embrace the world again with a sense of wonder and gratitude. One morning, as the sunlight streamed through the windows and bathed the apartment in a soft golden glow, Oliver found himself looking out over the bustling city. He had once felt like an outsider, a spectator in his own life, but now everything seemed different. The world outside, once full of noise and chaos, now felt full of possibilities. He could hear the sounds of children playing in the park, the laughter of friends chatting on the corner, the soft murmur of a city coming alive with energy. With Claude beside him, the world didn't feel so overwhelming anymore. They would take long walks together, meandering through the city streets, exploring the parks, and stopping to enjoy the small moments that made life so special. Each day felt like a gift, and each moment was an opportunity to reconnect, to embrace the simple joys that often went unnoticed. Their bond had grown deeper, more intuitive. Oliver had learned to listen to the quiet language of his companion, to recognize the subtle shifts in Claude's body language and the gentle rhythm of his movements. It was as though the dog could sense Oliver's moods, offering comfort in times of solitude and energy when it was needed most. They were two souls, walking side by side, discovering the world together. And yet, the most remarkable change had come from within Oliver himself. He had once believed that his best days were behind him, that the years of creative passion and excitement were just distant memories. But Claude had shown him that it was never too late to start anew. The man who had once been content to stay inside, avoiding the world, was now venturing out, embracing life once again. He had even taken up his brushes, reviving his love for painting, capturing the world around him with a newfound appreciation. It was as though Claude had opened a door to a new chapter of his life, one filled with creative exploration, joyful moments, and connections with others. The apartment, once a place of isolation and quiet resignation, now felt like a home filled with life, warmth, and companionship. And every evening, as the two of them settled in for the night, Oliver couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the simple, quiet companionship that had changed everything. Claude had given him more than just a friend. The dog had given him a reason to live fully once again. With his furry companion by his side, Oliver was reminded that life was not about looking back or dwelling on what had been lost. It was about looking forward, embracing the present moment, and making the most of every opportunity. As the sun set one evening, casting its warm glow over the apartment, Oliver sat by the window. Claude nestled at his feet. He reflected on how far they had come together. The once grieving man, whose heart had been closed off from the world, had opened himself to a new chapter. He had found the joy of companionship, the excitement of creative expression, and the peace of acceptance. With Claude by his side, the world no longer felt like a lonely place. The journey they had embarked on together had not been easy, but it had been one of transformation, growth, and healing. And in that quiet moment, as the evening settled around them, Oliver knew that this was only the beginning. There were more adventures to be had, more memories to be made, and more chapters to write in the story of his life. As he closed his eyes that night, with Claude curled up beside him, Oliver drifted off to sleep with a peaceful heart, knowing that with each new day, the story would continue, one full of companionship, creativity, and the quiet, powerful magic of friendship.